The colonial city of San Luis Potosí had witnessed centuries of silver trade, wealth, and shadows. Miguel Reyes, a contractor in his early 50s, inherited a crumbling 17th-century mansion on Calle Hidalgo from an elderly aunt he barely remembered. The house had stood abandoned for decades, its adobe walls cracking, its wooden beams rotting in the humid Mexican climate. Miguel saw opportunity, a restoration project that could restore his struggling business and honor family legacy. But on the third week of work, while reinforcing the ground floor, Miguel's crew discovered something impossible. Beneath layers of colonial tile and packed earth lay a hollow chamber. When a floor beam gave way, Miguel found himself staring into darkness and the gleam of something metallic catching his flashlight. The air rising from below carried the sharp scent of copper and something else, the mustiness of centuries-old secrets. What began as a simple restoration became an obsession. Who had built this tunnel? Why was silver hidden beneath the house? And more pressing, if he reported the discovery, who would claim ownership? The government, the church, or the descendants of whoever had concealed it? As Miguel descended deeper into the house's hidden architecture, he realized he wasn't the first to search for answers. Someone else had been watching the restoration, someone who knew exactly what lay beneath that floor. The tunnel opened onto a historical mystery that would force Miguel to confront his own family's past, his integrity, and a question that had haunted San Luis for 400 years. What really happened to the silver that disappeared during the colonial era? Chapter 1. The Inheritance. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and leather. Miguel Reyes sat across from Licenciado Hernandez, listening to details about a house he'd never entered. His aunt, Doña Beatriz, had died at 93, leaving behind a single heir, Miguel, the nephew she'd met twice at family gatherings decades ago. "The property is valuable," Hernandez explained, sliding a photograph across the desk. "The location alone, Calle Hidalgo in the historic district, makes it worth restoring. The house itself dates to the 1600s, but it requires significant investment." Miguel studied the image. The mansion was a skeleton of what it must have once been. Vines consumed the facade. The windows were boarded, the roof showed missing tiles like broken teeth, but something about it called to him, a sense of weight, of stories pressed into adobe and timber. He was 49 years old, running a modest construction business that barely broke even. His marriage had ended 5 years ago. His crew was small, loyal, but rarely fully employed. This house could change everything. A proper restoration would take months, maybe a year. He'd hire his crew at steady wages. He'd build his reputation as someone who could resurrect colonial architecture. "I'll take it," Miguel said. The transfer took 3 weeks. By late September, Miguel stood before the mansion with his 2 workers, Carlos, a stonemason who'd worked beside him for 15 years, and young Thomas, barely 20, who carried tools and asked endless questions. "This place is dying," Carlos said, running his hand along the crumbling exterior. "Not dying," Miguel corrected. "Sleeping. We're waking it up." They began with the walls, assessing structural integrity. The adobe was stable where it was protected, crumbling where rain had eroded it. Inside, the air was thick and cool. Dust particles caught the light like suspended time. Furniture draped in white sheets, paintings on walls, their subjects faded to ghosts. For 2 weeks, Miguel mapped the restoration mentally. Foundation work first. Then the interior framework, the roof, windows, electrical systems. Nothing unusual emerged, just the expected degradation of 3 centuries. But on the 15th day, while Thomas was removing tiles from the ground floor to assess the foundation, he called out. His voice had changed, no longer the confident young worker, but something trembling. "Patron, come look at this." Miguel descended the wooden ladder to the parlor. Thomas stood beside a growing hole in the floor, his face pale. Beneath the colonial tiles and compacted earth lay something else. A wooden beam. Yes, but also a void. Darkness that extended beneath the house. Miguel knelt and aimed his flashlight into the opening. The beam caught something metallic, something that caught light and threw it back like a reflection from the past. His hands trembled as he widened the hole. "What is it?" Tomas whispered. Miguel didn't answer. He was thinking of his aunt, Doña Beatriz, who'd lived her entire life in this house and never once mentioned what lay beneath her feet. He was thinking of San Luis, the Silver City, and the stories old people still told about wealth that vanished into the earth during dangerous times. He was thinking, what else is buried here? Chapter 2. The Discovery. By dawn, Miguel had worked through the night. He'd widened the hole carefully, removing tile and soil without destroying what lay below. By the time Carlos arrived, the opening was large enough for a man to squeeze through. "Dios mío," Carlos breathed. The chamber beneath was perhaps 2 meters wide, its walls packed earth reinforced with wooden supports, ancient supports. The wood turned black with age. And covering the floor, catching their flashlight beams like stars, lay silver coins, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Miguel reached down and picked one up. The weight was real. The coin was heavy, stamped with a date, 1642. "This is impossible," Tomas said. "How much is here?" "I don't know," Miguel admitted, but his mind was already calculating. Colonial silver coins, this many, this old. The historical value alone was immense. The monetary value was beyond calculation. "We have to tell someone," Carlos said. "Tell who?" Miguel's voice was harder than he intended. "The government. They'll seize it. The church will claim it belonged to priests or royalty. My family's inheritance will disappear into bureaucracy." "It's not ours to keep," Carlos said quietly. Miguel knew his friend was right, but he also knew that finding treasure always changed everything. Ownership became complicated. Suddenly, people emerged from nowhere claiming rights or relationships. Documents surfaced, arguments erupted. He made a decision. "We don't tell anyone yet, not until I understand what this is. Give me a week. I'll research the house, my family, the city's history. Then we'll know what to do." Carlos looked unhappy, but he nodded. That evening, Miguel sat in the municipal archive, poring over colonial records. The house had been built in 1643, just a year after that coin was stamped. It was commissioned by a merchant named Rodrigo Reyes, Miguel's ancestor. The documents described Rodrigo as a wealthy trader, but his ledgers revealed something else. In 1643, he'd suddenly liquidated most of his assets. He'd become cautious, secretive. By 1650, his public business had contracted significantly. He lived quietly, rarely traveled, stayed close to his house. Miguel found a letter written in colonial Spanish, its edges brittle. It was addressed to Rodrigo's son and dated 1678, just before Rodrigo's death at an advanced age. "Whatever lies beneath the tiles," the letter read in Miguel's careful translation, "remains there for good reason. The silver was saved, not stolen. It was hidden from those who would have taken it by force. Leave it buried. The true wealth is that we survived. Disturbing the past disturbs the dead." Miguel stared at those words. His family had known. For 4 centuries they'd known and said nothing. They'd simply lived above the secret, generation after generation, guarding it through silence. He photocopied the letter and drove home as night fell over San Luis. The mansion was dark. He parked outside and sat in his truck, the letter on the seat beside him. Only then did he notice the car across the street. It had been there when he arrived. The engine was off, but someone sat in the driver's seat, watching the house. Miguel's pulse quickened. He'd assumed he was safe, working privately, keeping the discovery secret. But secrets have a way of leaking. Rumors travel. And in San Luis, where silver was still the city's lifeblood, certain people always listened for opportunities. Miguel started his truck and watched the car's headlights come alive. He was being followed. Chapter 3. Watchers in the Dark. For 3 days, Miguel noticed the car. Different cars. Actually, he saw at least 2 distinct vehicles, both always positioned with a view of the mansion or his business office. He wasn't paranoid enough to be certain they were coordinated, but he was paranoid enough to be careful. He stopped mentioning the chamber to anyone except Carlos and Tomas. He kept the hole covered with plywood and old furniture, invisible from the street. But he also accelerated his research, spending late nights in libraries and archives, trying to piece together why silver had been hidden and who might still be searching for it. The answer came from an unexpected source. A retired history professor named Dr. Elena Vargas, whom he found through the university. He approached her carefully, pretending academic curiosity. "I'm restoring a colonial house," he explained in her office. "The owner, an ancestor, left cryptic notes about silver being hidden from those who would take it by force. I'm curious about the historical context." Dr. Vargas's eyes lit up. She was in her 70s, with silver hair and the intense focus of someone who'd spent a lifetime chasing mysteries. "Which ancestor? Which house?" "Rodrigo Reyes, the house on Calle Hidalgo." Dr. Vargas stood and walked to a shelf. She returned with a manuscript, yellowed, handwritten in colonial script. "I've been researching this for 20 years, she said. "Rodrigo Reyes was involved in what historians call the Gran Traslado, the Great Transfer. In 1642, the Spanish crown faced bankruptcy. The viceroy ordered wealthy merchants to contribute silver to the crown, but many merchants disagreed with where that silver would go. Some believed the money would benefit corrupt officials, not Spain itself. A very few, decided to hide their contributions." "Is that legal?" Miguel asked. "No, it's treason. But if you survived, if no one found your silver, then eventually the colonial administration collapsed anyway. The records were lost. The crime became history. Someone else is looking for it," Miguel said quietly. Dr. Vargas wasn't surprised. Always. There are treasure hunters, historians, descendants of investors. Some want knowledge, others want profit. A few want to settle old scores with families involved in colonial-era conspiracies. She paused. "If you found something, Miguel, be careful. People can become dangerous when silver is involved." That evening, parked outside his apartment, Miguel found a note under his windshield wiper. No signature, just a message in careful handwriting. "We know about the chamber. Let's discuss terms. Bring the documents to the warehouse on Avenida Lopez Mateos, Friday midnight. Come alone." Miguel's hands shook. He burned the note and called Carlos. "Don't go," Carlos said immediately. "This is how people disappear. If I don't go, they might try something else. The house, you, Tomas. Then we involve the authorities. The authorities will confiscate everything," Miguel said, "including our right to make any decisions about the find. We'll be witnesses, not owners. We'll have no say in what happens to my family's legacy." He knew he was rationalizing. He knew Carlos was right. But something deeper moved him. The need to understand who wanted the silver badly enough to watch his house. The need to make his own choice about what came next. If you're enjoying this adventure so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. He decided to go to the warehouse, but he also decided he wouldn't go alone. Chapter 4. The Warehouse. Miguel parked his truck 2 blocks from Avenida Lopez Mateos and walked the rest of the way. Carlos was hidden in the warehouse basement, armed with nothing but a crowbar and an old cell phone ready to call police if things went wrong. The warehouse was abandoned, its windows boarded, its interior a maze of shadows. Miguel's flashlight beam caught decades of dust, broken equipment, graffiti in languages he didn't recognize. A figure emerged from behind a stack of crates. A man in his 60s, weathered, with eyes that had clearly seen rough business. Miguel Reyes, the man said, not a question. I don't know who you are. My name is Vicente Martinez. My grandfather was involved in the Gran Traslado as well. Unlike your ancestor, my family's contribution was never recovered. My grandfather spent his life believing it was hidden beneath a specific house on Calle Hidalgo. He died searching for it. He left me his notes, his obsession. Vicente smiled without warmth. And my obligation, to steal silver. To recover what was always meant for my family. The crown's confiscation was illegal. My grandfather paid to help hide the silver, a partnership with Rodrigo Reyes. Half was his, half was yours. Over 4 centuries the debt has compounded. You owe me. Miguel's mind raced. He had no way to verify this, no documents proving partnership or percentages. This could be fabrication, exploitation, manipulation. Why should I believe you? Vicente pulled out an old document. Even in the dim light, Miguel could see the seal of the colonial period, the Spanish coat of arms. A contract, written in merchant's code, agreeing to a 50-50 split of hidden silver. Miguel's stomach dropped. Rodrigo hadn't acted alone. There had been a partner. I want my half, Vicente said. Remove the silver. Divide it. I disappear. You keep yours and whatever historical credit you want for the find. And if I refuse? Then complications arise. I have associates who've worked harder cases than this, or I go to the authorities and inform them that you've been hiding an archaeological find. They'll investigate your family's history. They'll find the same documents I found, and they'll seize everything while lawyers argue for years. It was the kind of threat that had teeth. Miguel understood now why someone had been watching. Vicente needed to know if Miguel would cooperate or resist before playing his cards. I need time, Miguel said. You have until Monday. The silver will be divided or circumstances will deteriorate. Vicente stepped back into shadow. Miguel heard a vehicle start somewhere beyond the warehouse walls, then silence. Carlos emerged from the basement, crowbar raised. I heard. What do we do? We get the silver out, Miguel decided, but not for Vicente. For ourselves. If we divide it fairly, we control the narrative. We decide who knows and when. That's theft, Miguel. It's survival, Carlos. If we don't act, we lose everything. Over the weekend, Miguel and Carlos worked carefully. They expanded the chamber, cataloguing coins and photographing everything. The silver was stacked in canvas bags. There were 32 of them, each containing approximately 50 kilograms of colonial coins. By Monday morning, they'd removed it all. The chamber lay empty, its wooden beams now bare, its secrets exposed to modern air. They stored the bags in a climate-controlled storage unit Miguel rented under a false name. Then they sealed the chamber beneath the house with concrete and tile, erasing all evidence. When Vicente came looking, he found nothing. Chapter 5. The Tunnel's Secret. With the chamber emptied, Miguel made a decision that surprised even him. He called Dr. Elena Vargas. I found something related to the Gran Traslado, he told her, asking her to meet him at the house. The professor arrived on Wednesday morning, accompanied by 2 colleagues from the university, a historian and an archaeologist. Miguel led them to the sealed chamber and showed them photographs he'd taken before removing the coins. This is unprecedented, the archaeologist breathed, studying the images. A merchant's vault dating to the 1640s. The preservation alone. There's more, Miguel interrupted. I need to show you something. He'd spent Sunday exploring the chamber more thoroughly, and he'd discovered what should have been obvious. The tunnel didn't begin in this chamber. It extended beyond it. There was a narrow passage, ancient and partially collapsed, that ran toward the street. The professor and her colleagues helped him carefully excavate further. By late afternoon, they'd uncovered a section of tunnel that opened onto what had once been an underground passage, likely part of the city's old drainage system, or, more likely, a deliberately constructed secret route. Following the tunnel's direction, they calculated it ran toward the old cathedral. Dr. Vargas's eyes widened. During the colonial period, she explained, the church operated in cooperation with merchants. Silver moved through multiple channels, not all official. If there was a tunnel connecting a merchant's house to the cathedral district, silver could have been moved at night, hidden within church vaults, protected by religious sanctuary. "Are you saying the church knew about this?" one of her colleagues asked. "I'm saying the church and the merchant class were interwoven, officially separate, actually dependent on each other." Dr. Vargas turned to Miguel. "Your ancestor wasn't just hiding from the crown. He was working within a network. The tunnel isn't a secret from the church. It's proof of their collaboration." This realization changed everything. The silver wasn't just an individual's rebellion against the crown. It was organized, systematic, and implicated the highest religious authorities. If that information became public, it would attract far more attention than just Vicente Martinez. It would interest historians, government officials, and church authorities, all with different agendas. That night, Miguel made another decision. He contacted Dr. Vargas privately. "I want to do something," he said, "officially. I want to donate the historical findings to the university. I want this studied, documented, and presented to the world as a major historical discovery. But I want to do it carefully, with your help, so that the story is told correctly." "What about the silver?" she asked. "The silver is separate. The silver was already claimed by history 400 years ago. What remains now is understanding the truth." Dr. Vargas smiled. It was the smile of an academic who'd spent 20 years chasing ghosts and had finally glimpsed substance. "Then we do this right," she said. Chapter 6. Complications and Choices. The university's announcement was scheduled for Friday. Dr. Vargas was preparing a formal presentation for the Historical Society. Miguel had documents ready, photographs catalogued, the tunnel's route marked for architectural study. But on Thursday, Vicente Martinez returned. Not with associates this time. Alone, at the house, carrying an old photograph. Miguel was inside, reinforcing the tunnel's entrance to prevent it from collapsing further, when he heard footsteps. Vicente stood in the parlor, looking at the sealed chamber floor. "You removed it?" he said flatly. "Yes. And now you're turning it over to academics. The discovery belongs to history," Miguel said carefully. "Not to either of us." Vicente raised the photograph. It showed two men from the 1940s, one of them clearly Vicente's grandfather. "This is my grandfather," Vicente said, 3 years before he died searching for that silver. He spent his life believing his family's inheritance was in that chamber. I spent my life believing I owed him justice." Vicente's voice cracked slightly, but maybe he was owed something else. Maybe he was owed the truth. Miguel waited. "My grandfather's partner, Rodrigo Reyes, did keep half," Vicente continued. "My grandfather kept his share in a different location, a cave system northeast of the city. I've known where it was for years. I never excavated it because I was afraid of what I'd find, afraid that if my inheritance was real, I'd have to decide what to do with it. Easier to obsess about your family's silver." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Vicente took a breath, "maybe it's time I found out what my grandfather actually left behind, and maybe I don't need your half to do it. Maybe I need to stop being angry at a dead merchant and start honoring a dead relative by understanding his story." He placed the photograph on a table. "Good luck with your university. Tell them the tunnel was built by both families. Tell them it was a partnership. My grandfather deserves that much recognition." Vicente left without another word. If this treasure hunt already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more forgotten stories to light. Miguel stood alone in the parlor, holding a photograph of a man he'd never met. who died believing he was owed a debt that history had already collected. Chapter 7. The Public Discovery. The university's presentation drew nearly 200 people to the Historical Society's auditorium. Dr. Vargas commanded the stage with the authority of someone who'd finally proven a 30-year theory. She presented the tunnel, the chamber, the coins, displayed in replica form, the originals being carefully studied, and the historical documents linking Rodrigo Reyes and Vicente Martinez's grandfather, whose name was Gabriel Morales, to the Gran Traslado. The presentation framed the discovery not as theft, but as resistance. Two merchants refusing to participate in what they believed was illegal confiscation, a network that included church officials, minor nobility, and wealthy traders who decided that their wealth served Spain better when distributed according to their conscience rather than the crown's demands. What's remarkable, Dr. Vargas concluded, is not that they hid silver. It's that they were part of a much larger conspiracy that shaped colonial San Luis. This single house, this single tunnel, proves that the neat divisions we draw between church, merchant, and state were always artificial. History was written by people making complicated choices in complicated times. The media coverage was immediate and extensive. Within days, the discovery was featured in national newspapers. The tunnel was compared to other colonial structures. Historians debated the significance, and then, unexpectedly, people came forward. Descendants of other merchants involved in the Gran Traslado, families who'd kept documents, stories, evidence of other hiding places. Within a month, 3 additional chambers had been identified across San Luis. The city became a focal point for colonial history research. The government established an official archaeological project. The university received funding to properly excavate and study each site. Miguel's house became part of a historical tour. Tourists walked through the restored rooms and down into a carefully preserved section of the tunnel. Professional archaeologists worked to map the entire underground network. Chapter 8. The Weight of History. By September, Miguel's construction crew had expanded. Instead of restoring a single house, he was now project manager for the restoration of multiple colonial properties across San Luis. His business had become a historical preservation company, but he'd made a decision about the silver itself. The coins had been divided fairly, 1/3 to the university for study and display, 1/3 donated to the city for educational purposes, and 1/3, Miguel's share, had been liquidated carefully through auction houses and private collectors. The money was substantial, but Miguel had always known that wasn't the real discovery. He'd used a portion of his share to create a foundation, the Reyes Morales Foundation for Colonial Studies. It funded research into merchant networks during the colonial period. It supported young historians investigating economic and political resistance in Mexican history. He'd also invited Vicente Martinez to serve on the foundation's board. "We're partners," Miguel had said when making the offer. "Our ancestors were partners. They hid silver together for reasons that made sense to them. We should understand those reasons and tell their story correctly." Vicente had wept when accepting. He'd eventually led an expedition to his grandfather's cave system, finding another chamber, smaller than the first, but equally significant. His family's silver had been there for 80 years, waiting in darkness for someone to care enough to find it. The two men often walked through the tunnel together, discussing what it meant to inherit secrets, what it meant to honor the past while deciding for yourself what came next. "My grandfather died, believing history owed him something," Vicente said once, standing in the old chamber. "But history doesn't owe anyone anything. It just demands that we tell it truthfully." Miguel understood now why his aunt, Doña Beatriz, had never disturbed the floor. Some inheritances weren't meant to be claimed by a single generation. Some secrets were meant to be passed down, protected, until the right moment arrived for them to become public knowledge. That moment had come, and with it came understanding. The silver had never been the treasure. The truth had always been beneath the tiles. Chapter 9. The Inheritance, complete. 10 months after the first floor collapsed, Miguel stood on the roof of his restored house, watching the sunset paint San Luis in shades of gold and crimson. The city sprawled below him, colonial spires, narrow streets, architecture layered with centuries. The house renovation was complete. Period furniture filled the rooms. The original paintings had been restored. The tunnel section was preserved behind museum-quality glass, accessible to the public through the ground floor. But the most significant change was invisible. The house was no longer a secret keeper. It had become a witness to history, a place where people came to understand their city differently. Dr. Vargas had published a book, The Silver Underneath: Merchants, Resistance, and the Hidden Economies of Colonial Mexico. It had won academic prizes and brought attention to research methods that were changing how historians understood colonial resistance movements. Vicente Martinez had become a respected collaborator. His grandfather's story, the obsession, the decades of searching, the eventual finding, had inspired a documentary that aired nationally. It portrayed Gabriel Morales not as a thief, but as a man trying to honor his family's memory against impossible odds. Miguel's business had evolved beyond what he'd imagined. He was no longer a struggling contractor. He'd become an expert in colonial restoration, teaching workshops, consulting on projects across Mexico. But the real inheritance, the one he thought about most, was something his aunt had left him without words. She'd lived in this house for 80 years. She'd known about the silver. She'd protected it not through secrecy, but through indifference, letting it rest beneath the tiles while she lived her life above. She'd been waiting, he understood now. Waiting for the right person to inherit her burden, waiting for someone who would understand that the silver's value was in the story it could tell, not the money it could bring. On the roof, as darkness fell, Miguel pulled out his phone and called Carlos. "The tunnel is secure," he reported. "The final consolidation is complete. She's stable." "Good," Carlos said. "And the new restoration project?" "Starting next week. And 1680s hacienda outside the city. They found evidence of tunnels there too." "So it begins again," Carlos laughed. "It begins again," Miguel agreed. He thought about his aunt, Doña Beatriz, who'd spent 93 years guarding silver without ever truly possessing it. He thought about Vicente's grandfather, who'd spent decades searching for justice in coins. He thought about Rodrigo Reyes, 4 centuries dead, whose decision to hide wealth had rippled through centuries, changing lives, creating questions, demanding answers. History, he'd learned, wasn't something that ended. It was something that waited in the soil, beneath the tiles, in the spaces between walls. It waited for someone brave enough to disturb it, curious enough to understand it, and wise enough to share it. The silver had been the beginning. The story was the true treasure. And the inheritance, the real inheritance, was knowing the difference. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of discovery and hidden history. See you in the next adventure.